Hello everyone, and welcome to the 201st episode of Analyzing Evil, featuring Art the Clown from the Terrifier franchise. A recent addition to the pantheon of horror icons, Art has become as recognizable as Michael Myers and Freddy Krueger. And while his design is fantastic, it's the way he moves and acts that has made him such a memorable character. And in this video, we're going to discuss all the little details that we see throughout the entries in this series that have been released so far that make Art one of the most sinisterly delightful horror villains ever made. But before we start talking about the overwhelming horror of this mime-like clown, or clown-like mime, let's first talk about our sponsor for this video, Mondo. Mondo is a company that is revolutionizing the men's odor control industry by reimagining and perfecting the products you use on a daily basis. Mondo was created by a doctor who saw firsthand how normal BO was being misdiagnosed and mistreated, and so the team over at Mondo has created products that serve as high-performance whole-body deodorant that you can use everywhere, like your pits, feet, and packages. And Mondo has been clinically proven to control odor better than a shower with soap alone. 12 hours after a shower, the average men's grundle level, which is a neat little term used to measure odor levels, is a 5 out of 10. But with Mondo, that becomes 0 out of 10. And considering Mondo is more like a pre-odorant that stops odor before it starts with its unique formula powered by mandelic acid, it's easy to see why. And you can fight these odors with 4 spectacular scents of your choosing, including bourbon leather, clover woods, Mount Fuji, and Pro Sport. My favorite out of the 4 is their Mount Fuji scent, and Mondo was kind enough to send me one of their starter packages, and included in that package was this spray-on deodorant, stick deodorant, acidified body wash, and a 15-count pack of deodorant wipes. Depending on which package you choose, you can get either the spray or the body wash in yours, and both are equally fantastic. The spray is a great quick scent booster that I use before I leave the home, and when it's backed up by their stick deodorant that I apply right after a shower that doesn't even show on your skin, you're going to be smelling fresh all day, no matter what you're doing, especially if you fortify all that with their body wash beforehand. I'm particularly impressed with the fact that this stick deodorant is aluminum-free and still manages to do its job after an entire day of sweating, as I don't know about all of you, but other aluminum-free deodorants just don't have that extra punch required to last all day, but Mondo certainly does, and I love that I'm smelling better than I ever have before while also preserving my health. My partner and I have been highly impressed with Mondo's scent controlling power, and I couldn't recommend it strongly enough. And with a great deal that is their starter package, which includes full-size stick deodorant, cream tube deodorant, or a spray tube deodorant as well as 2 free products of your choice, like their mini body wash and deodorant wipes, I advise that you up your scent game today by heading over to Mondo.com by clicking the link in the description and entering my code TheVioli at checkout, as not only will you receive their incredible deal on their starter packs, but an additional $5 off as well, which is a grand total of 40% off your first purchase of a product that's going to revolutionize your daily routine. Thank you, Mondo, for sponsoring this video. Now, without further ado, let's begin. When it comes to slasher villains, it's often the case that the horror of their actions is amplified further by a suitably horrifying appearance, and Art is no exception. Melding aspects of both clowns and mimes in his design, Art's monochromatic mime-derived color scheme is bleak enough, but overall, the costume he wears wouldn't be something that would strike terror within you right off the bat. It's about as traditional of a clown costume as you can get, complete with pom-pom buttons, a frilly neck collar, oversized shoes, white fingerless gloves, and a tiny hat. No, the costume is only made terrifying by the person wearing it, and the face attached to that person. Art's makeup, like his costume, is very monochromatic, with white face paint, black eyeliner with traditional clown markings, black exaggerated eyebrows, a black dot on the tip of his nose, and black mouth liner. And Art's black and white color scheme when applied to his makeup is far more unsettling when compared to his costume. But even though that's true, it's not the makeup or the costume that makes Art such a creepy character, it's his facial structure. Art's face is a bit too large and a bit too angular. His head, especially when his bald cap is removed, is enormous, far larger than any normal human should be, and his concave temples and jowls, protruding cheekbones, sunken eye sockets, large chin, stereotypical witch's nose, and set of brown pointed teeth accented by dark and decaying gums are what transforms him from odd mime clown fusion into certified nightmare fuel. I mean, technically they're the same character, but take a look at this early iteration of Art as portrayed by Mike Giannelli that was featured in the anthology film All Hallows Eve. Is he still a bit unsettling? Sure he is, but this is what Art's makeup and costume look like on your average human male, and it's nowhere near as terrifying as the Art we have now, who by virtue of being a mimey clown already triggers that uncanny valley effect within us. But with his aforementioned facial features accentuating these aspects of him, it elevates that feeling from a 5 to a 10. Couple all of this with his garbage bag of tricks and the grime or blood that's usually caked on his person, and you have the perfect recipe for the grungy clown of horror that is Art the Clown. Now, the irrational fears that many people have of clowns and mimes have always been numbered among the more common phobias out there, and I don't think it's a stretch to claim that if you were in a room with 10 people, 7 of those people would claim to either outright fear clowns or mimes, or at least express how they creep them out in some way. Personally, I enjoy both. A well-done performance by a clown or a mime is something that I've always appreciated, and I think it's rather unfortunate that so many people fear them because they can be entertaining and funny when done right. Now obviously art is supposed to be terrifying, and there's nothing irrational about fearing him. But the point I just made about them being entertaining and funny, when done right, still stands. As though I risk sounding like a broken record at this point, it's not even Art's insidious appearance that makes him such an effective, entertaining, and memorable horror villain. It's the way he acts. Art is more often than not painfully gleeful and whimsical, with wide-eyed heavy-browed smiles being his most sinister method of intimidation, with otherwise excruciating expressions of glee, often accentuating the brutally horrendous actions he takes. As a mime-clown fusion, Art never speaks, and that makes everything he does infinitely more harrowing. Silent laughter and slapstick antics radiating from his person, as he brutalizes people and animals in the most terrifying ways you can imagine, are both highly unsettling and mesmerizing. And watching Art treat people as nothing more than toys that are to be taken apart at the seams is a big part of what has made him such a standout character. Now, as much as I'd like to go into detail about all the things Art has done in this series, I don't think YouTube would appreciate that very much. And if you've seen any of these films, which I'm sure you have, you know that everything that Art does is heinously evil, and Art is without a doubt an evil person. But what is Art's motivation for killing and torturing all of the people he does? Well, that's actually relatively easy to confirm. However, his motivations do evolve a tad as his character evolves. In the director's commentary for the first film, Damien Leone stated that Art was human, and in that film, we're given an indicator for this in the opening sequence, as we find Art applying his makeup before heading out for a night on the town on Halloween. And considering he is human, I reckon those odd facial features I mentioned earlier have to be some kind of prosthetics, as though it might be possible for a human to be born with that sort of facial structure. I imagine that would be quite rare. One interesting thing to note about Art here as well is that even when he's experiencing some brutal punishment when his victims are fighting back, he never once makes a sound, and if it weren't for this little detail, I'd have assumed that his whole silence gimmick was just that, a gimmick. But if he doesn't even let out so much as a whimper when he's suffering some serious injuries, that leads me to believe that he's completely mute, which is something that could potentially serve as a reason why he is who he is. But we'll just have to see about that if and when we learn more about his background. So as a human being, what are Art's motivations? Well, again, depending on whether or not we get some backstory for him in Terrifier 4, they might be expanded upon. But for now, the overall goal for Art's actions seems to just be his overt sadism, as I can see no other explanation at this point for why he does what he does, other than the fact that Art just simply loves murdering and torturing people for the fun of it. However, at the end of Terrifier 1, Art chooses to end his life once he's about to be apprehended by the police, but he's almost immediately brought back to life by the influence of a mysterious pale little girl, who after watching the third film, doesn't seem to be so mysterious anymore. Now, if we look at what we're given about Art's character in All Hallows Eve, and thus the Terrifier short film, we can see in these entries that Art is clearly some sort of supernatural being, which would mean that he already was one in the first Terrifier. But both the short film and the Ninth Circle are sort of hard to fit into Art's timeline, and I don't think it really makes sense to consider them canon at this point. We did get an Easter egg at the end of Terrifier 3, where a woman is reading a book called The Ninth Circle on the bus Art gets on, but I think that really was just an Easter egg for the fans, more so than it was confirmation that those entries are canon. So with that in mind, I think it's safe to say that Art didn't have any sort of supernatural powers before he was brought back, powers that he was granted by the aforementioned little girl, who I believe is all but confirmed to be none other than Satan himself. And because that's true, Art has been elevated to the status of a demon by the Lord of Evil himself. There are two things in particular that indicate this to be true. One is that about halfway through the third film, Sienna confronts her brother with a letter he wrote her while she was in a psychiatric hospital that partially explains what Art is now and who that pale little girl is. Here's what the letter said. "We have to destroy the little girl before it's too late, Sienna. Destroy her because she's inhuman, a demon. Sometimes demons try to enter our world, only they can't do it alone. They have to choose a vessel, someone recently deceased, who functions as a bridge between worlds, but not just anyone. Someone sinister, depraved, the worst kind of evil." So when Art died, he either became a conduit for demonic energy, or he caused such misery and mayhem during his killing spree that he allowed the devil to possess the body of Vicky Hayes, who then resurrects Art as a demon. And after he resurrects him a second time at the end of the second film, he becomes his new partner in crime, or more appropriately, his boss. An interesting little detail that pops up here and there is Art's distaste for his new master, as there are a few points where we see Art giving Vicky, or the pale little girl, some disapproving looks, and perhaps this indicates that Art isn't exactly too happy with having to follow the designs of another, instead of killing whoever he wants, whenever he wants to. Now, the other indicator that I think makes it pretty clear that the devil is directly responsible for all this, and is likely both the pale little girl and the entity inhabiting Vicky, is because of what happens at the end of Terrifier 3. After Art and Devil Vicky make their way to Sienna's new home, they proceed to slaughter nearly everyone there, as is to be expected. But rather than just creating a depraved mess with their kills like usual, they use Sienna's uncle's body to create a mock crucifixion, and Devil Vicky is wearing a crown of thorns before she places that crown on Sienna's head, both of which are clear references to Jesus, but specifically, Jesus' crucifixion, which becomes even more on the nose when we see Art whipping Sienna with her uncle's guts. Now obviously all demons are an affront to God, but to go the extra mile and recreate the crucifixion in a couple different ways seems like something the devil would do, and considering the devil once tempted Jesus to give in to him in much the same way he attempts to get Sienna to, I think this entity being the devil is all too fitting. What makes this even more plausible is that Sienna has clearly been granted some God-given powers, and she's seemingly been charged with becoming a savior much like Jesus, who was meant to battle against the forces of evil, God's chosen representative on earth if you will. And if the devil were able to get a hold over Sienna, it's reasonable to assume that he'd usher in a reign of terror that would transform the world into a gore-filled hellscape that's horrifying beyond anything we could imagine. So now, after becoming a demon, it would seem that Art is in part, or mostly driven by the plans of his new master, which makes sense when you consider he had both of them laid dormant in an abandoned apartment complex until Sienna was released from the hospital. And while Art as a human was a monster who could be counted amongst the most evil people who ever existed, he's now something exponentially more terrifying, a tool for the enemy of all humanity that will help him carry out his dark designs with extreme, whimsical cruelty. However, if he had just remained a man with a horrible penchant for sadism, Art still would have been one of the most diabolical slasher villains ever created, and one of the most sickening. But now that he isn't, I'm very interested to see what direction this character will take in Terrifier 4, and considering a portal to hell opened at the end of the third movie, and Sienna has resolved to chase after Gabby, I have a feeling that that film is going to be one of the most exciting conclusions to a franchise that we've ever been given. Until then though, we have plenty of things to look to in the first 3 films that show us just how monstrously evil Art the Clown truly is. And as a contender for the most brutal slasher villain ever made, Art is a representation of one of the most horrifying types of evil. Evil that has no true purpose. Evil that seeks to sow suffering and destruction simply for the sake of it. An evil that laughs in your face as it rips out your insides and destroys everything that you love. Thank you all for tuning in to this episode of Analyzing Evil, and I hope you've enjoyed. What are your thoughts on Art the Clown? Let me know down below, and leave a suggestion for a villain you'd like to see featured while you're at it. If you like this video, hit that thumbs up button, and make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. A big thank you to all of my subscribers, my patrons, my members, and anyone who's decided to honor me with a super thank. And a most vile thank you to those whose names you're seeing on screen now. Join the channel's Discord server and subreddit to interact with myself and the community, and follow me on the social media platforms listed below to keep up with the channel. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll be seeing you soon.